Hi, good afternoon. This is Ka Singh, and welcome to the 10th webinar for the Venice Biennale 2021. Today's title is Old and New, for the three exhibits that we are going to discuss today are all related to history. And together with me, we have three groups of participants, exhibitors, including Nicholas Ital from Landscape Architecture of Hong Kong U. We have Patrick Huang from CUHK. Hi, Patrick. And we also have two parties for the exhibits co-created and created by Shadow, including Benjamin Lam and also Kin Chon Chen. Hi. And we have Lavina Ahuja, lecturer from the Faculty of Architecture, Hong Kong U. And we're new to the webinar. So far, we have two student participants representing Architectural Conservation Program of Hong Kong U. They are Edison Hui and also Elsa Mu. Hello, Edison, Elsa. Yep, so we have lots of materials to present today, and they are all rooted from the title of the Venice Biennale, with distribution, people and environment. So I better don't talk too much, and I will have Nicholas to start his presentation for us first. Nicholas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ka Singh, for the warm introduction. Let me share my screen first. There you go. All right, first of all, a big round of applause to Ka Singh and really the whole curatorial team for creating this online sharing session and giving us actually the possibility to discuss and explore our interesting works together. We are in a very challenging time, so thanks for hanging in there and continuing to really push this exhibition forward. So for today, before I will start to talk about the installation itself, maybe a few words to myself. My name is Nicholas Ettel. I'm a lecturer here at the Division of Landscape Architecture at HKU, where I'm teaching actually undergraduate students the importance of interdisciplinarity. I'm the course coordinator of the FICs, which is the Faculty Interdisciplinary Courses. It's a one-year-long initiative in which we, the teaching team, consists of Professor Chris Webster, Dean of the Faculty of Architecture, and Mr. Matthew Pryor. He's Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning and head of the division. So we, as the teaching team, we introduce all faculty first-year students, so currently 200, to the built environment discipline, which is a fantastic and exciting journey. Another course that I'm teaching is a Common Core course called 24 Frames, in which my students learn how to visually communicate powerful ideas through short films. And film is also the core academic research of myself. So I would like to start with a little teaser, the introduction to this fantastic project, which is called Alice in Wonderland. All right, I hope you enjoyed that little teaser. It actually all started as a Design Trust seed grant project in 2018 about back alleys and back alley occupation in Hong Kong and Macau. So a few parts of that project was then exhibited at PMQ, but more on that later on. So this ongoing research, Alice in Wonderland, is focused on how citizens in Hong Kong are using occupying and readapting back alleys for their daily lives, but also for their businesses. So for example, this paper craftsman in Sai Yin Pun on 2nd Street, or Madame Lim, a very famous noodle shop on High Street, and how she's using the extension, the courtyard extension to the back during busy lunch hours for her restaurant. So by conducting interviews with occupants and shop owners, we were able to document and really trace these unique stories and histories into a website with the same name. So this was all possible through fruitful collaborations with local NGOs, such as iDiscover, a platform for cultural mapping and community engagement here in Hong Kong. And you can find all the links and here the QR code to the website as well. So please have a look. It's a great variety of work from Hong Kong and Macau, and also artist collaborations. And overall, the underlying slogan is, if back alleys could talk, what can they tell us? So in general, just to give you a very brief introduction to the topic itself, in general, back alleys, especially in southern China, they hold incredibly rich histories as they develop from a typical shop house courtyard layouts into technical necessities of light and trash and air ventilations. But then, and this is what we experience these days, back into these neighborhood connectors of today. So even though they're highly regulated, as I mentioned, for trash, for light, for air, back alleys, not only in Hong Kong, but also in Macau, hold a wonderful archive of human interaction on street levels and being extensively used by neighbors and locals. So therefore, studying these vital urban leftover spaces gives us unique insights to an important neighborhood connector, and really spaces of exchange, of rest, of eat, of smoke, or sometimes just hide and seek. So why is this important to the Biennale exhibition? As we're still limited travel-wise, this multimedia installation gives our visitors a wonderful chance of experience something different, an immersive virtual experience. So without the need of really physically traveling around the world or even in Hong Kong, the provided technology allows them to fully immerse themselves into these unusual, overlooked leftover places. So using the latest handheld 360-degree filming technology and VR goggles at the venue, visitors really gain insights and explore these last remaining Cantonese barbershops in Wan Chai, for example. And just for, especially about this example in Wan Chai, the additional beauty of this documented Cantonese barbershop here is not only its diverse history, which spans nearly 60 years, but and it's a wonderful informal back alley cabin, but it was also captured and cinematically appreciated by Wong Kar-wai's masterpiece Fallen Angel from 1995. And here, just for the sake of time, here's just some film stills about the interior and the focus really on atmosphere and nostalgia about these creative yet disappearing spaces. And really all the action takes place inside of this barbershop. So to wrap up this brief introduction, Alice in Wonderland allows visitors to explore something overlooked, sometimes disappearing, sometimes already gone, spaces through technologies such as VR and 360-degree filming. Here it's just some impressions from the shop itself. Mark, the owner who still runs the shop, and here, as I mentioned before, parts of this research was exhibited at PMQ in 2019. So here just a few opening night impressions of the show itself and their interaction with the visitors and the VR goggles. Obviously very fun interactions and surprises, because this immersive experience is something quite unique, and if you haven't experienced that before, you are indeed surprised. So I would like to end here with this film still, because this is what actually the visitors will experience, sitting in this wonderfully historically rich red leather barber chair in Wan Chai. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Nick. Oh, we see clapping hands, but unfortunately, all of us are mostly muted. So yeah, clapping hands from me as well. Yep, thanks very much. Nick, obviously, his old and new formula is not only on taking records of the historic fabrics, but also using new technology in creating his product, yeah, and allowing us to see things from a new angle. Yeah, thanks, Nick. So next we will have Patrick. Patrick, are you ready?
Hello. Yes.
Hi, Patrick. Yeah,
Hello.
great. So I'll pass the time over to you.
Okay, great. Hello, my name is Patrick Huang. I'm the director of the undergraduate program at CUHK, and I have been involved with the curriculum teaching and planning since 2010, and it's wonderful to join you here today. So I will, let's see, share my screen now. I hope it's the full screen. So I was asked to present, 10 to 15 minutes, but instead of showing the film that our team made, which was a 5 minutes compilation called The Building Disappearance, Exquisite Corpse, I thought I would share another project, which has a similar motivation and goals, which concerns the disappearance of the built heritage. So inspired by the disappearing spatial identity of Hong Kong, the following slides basically discusses the transformation of adaptive reuse in architecture through a series of drawing projects that serves as a site of memory, documentation, and imagination. To draw is to project and to make visible that which is invisible. By drawing the heritage, we are not only showing its visual appearances, but drawing out its historic traces. It serves to witness the heritage potentialities and connections to forge a spatial identity. In 1997, Akbar Abbas remarked that property speculation mean that every building in Hong Kong, however new or monumental, faces imminent ruin on the premise of here today, gone tomorrow. A logistics that by contracting time dispenses even with the pathos of decay. The contrast of an ever mutating urban landscape make the political slogan of that time. 50 years without change, ever more paradoxical. So while maintaining the political status quo for half a century is no longer on the headlines, the goal of a stable and economically prosperous society remains a top priority 24 years later. From the uninterrupted expansion of Central Waterfront to the supercharged and energized East Kowloon, or the grand cultural monuments springing up in West Kowloon, the city's skyline is literally transforming before our eyes at the blink of every decade. The abundance of newness in building production also created a loss of spatial identity, formed by those building artifacts, previously living among us. It may also have prompted the urgency to treasure the old, from the ordinary arcade-style Nam Chong pawn shop to the extraordinary modernist Garden Bakery headquarters. The notion of loss not only captured the public's imagination, but imbue a recall for collective memory. Ironically, even if collective memory was not attainable, such as the case of Bishop Hill underground cisterns, where most of the public have not seen or realized the structure's existence, they were ecstatic that their advocacy had stopped the wrecking ball from taking it down. With loss looming in the background, the urgency to salvage, reinterpret, and co-live with heritage has triggered a question for this project, which offers alternative ways of seeing and activating the heritage buildings. What does heritage transformation have to do with drawing? A lot, in fact. Cultural critic John Berger identifies drawing as an act of discovery. It is a way of seeing, remember, and or imagined. So through drawing, we're not limiting ourselves to only seeing or showing the heritage at risk, but for seeing their past and future. This turn of understanding expresses a turn in direction. Rather than having a formed idea or image that we then project upon, our making becomes an exploratory search. This principle extends far beyond drawing, as our streets, schools, and cities can become sites of exploration. Architectural writer Daniel Barry has noted the verb to draw means both to produce a trace, as in a stroke of ink on paper, and to extract or to take something from a source, like a water well. It could also mean to pull out, to move through, or to close. Therefore, he argues that in the act of drawing, there is a constant tension between presence and absence, or orbiting around the subject under examination. So the first drawing project I wish to share that utilized the collaborative drawing as a site of memory, documentation, and imagination is called Sectioning Adaptive Reuse. So the project is co-created by 10 MArch students from CUHK, exploring 10 adaptive reuse projects across their sectional potentials. So the selected case studies are exemplary reuse projects of modern heritage in different parts of the world. So prior to drawing, students research original sketches of the design, the building's history, context, methodology, and adaptive reuse, and produce interpretive sectional drawing. So it is an act of constructing a visual narration of building's history. And multiple authors are responsible for the assembly of parts of different case studies. So the drawing is part analysis and part imaginative that triggers a new frontier. In contrast to the Exquisite Corpse, a surrealist game which the participant's own contribution is concealed from the next player, students in this case shall become familiar with their adjacent case studies and make suitable transmutations. So for example, Herzog and de Meuron's Keisha Forum mutated into Metaphor's Hong Kong Blue House clusters, while Vitar Architects' Musée des Beaux-Arts, seen here on the left, is transformed into Bernard Tschumy's Le Fresnoy Contemporary Art. The end of a section therefore becomes a threshold, articulating the moment of passage between two different buildings and directly inform the birth of a new space. Abbas has pointed out that the preservation of old buildings gives us history in sight, but it also means keeping his history in sight as S-I-G-H-T. This is both a curse and a blessing. He noted that the practice of preservation often materializes on the level of patina by turning local history through the use of built artifacts as merely decorative images for visual consumption. A critique of preservation is thus also a critique of visual ideology. So the argument is not directed so much against preservation per se, but against the use of preservation as history to bring about the disappearance of history. So in Hong Kong and in other cities in this region, there are projects that are disguised under the label of cultural heritage with the agenda that claim to strike a balance between commercial viability, community identification, and cultural presence. In reality, however, the project merely serves as a kind of marketing backdrop for branding accessories that facilitates consumerism. In the case of Wan Chai Market, the Development Bureau adopted the core element conservation approach, in which half of the market was dismantled and only the facade was kept. The addition of the 45-floor residential tower shows little consideration to the significance of the market as the only surviving example of the streamlined modern architecture in Hong Kong. Despite the disappointments, there are also exemplary cases. such as the Victoria Detention Center, turning into University of Chicago Center in Hong Kong, where the sinuous academic complex floats atop of historic remnants and amidst the abundant foliage. The stark juxtaposition in forms, materials, and settings not only enhance the resilience of the new building, but also creates provocative spaces for interaction between people, history, and nature. The second project I wish to share developed from a close reading and analysis of 7 shop houses in Kowloon, built during the early 20th century. The drawings are made by a group of undergraduate and postgraduate students drawing together during the summer elective. Although all 7 houses have intriguing stories, I will focus on the Chinese public dispensary as an example. The 2-story building is decorated with an Art Deco motif built in the 1930s. The facility has evolved over time from a place that rehabilitates the body to a government-run methadone clinic, providing treatment to opiate abusers. This change of use captured Aldo Rossi's thesis, which notably articulated that form persists and comes to preside over a built work in a world where function continually become modified. His reading has certainly found an alibi in the dispensary building. Fronting Yuk Street, the building is symmetrical and made with plaster concretine painted gray. Eastern and Western stylized molding are used as ornaments on the pilaster. The windows to the city have over time been fenced with stylized iron grills. As the facility is primarily providing services to substance abusers, the interior is off limits to the general public. Therefore, curious and exploratory architectural students who attempted to sneak in did not succeed. Stories like the dispensary offer only a glimpse to many more. So I will close with this, this other drawing. As Hong Kong continues to develop towards newness and placelessness, so does its state of disappearance. Drawing to resist disappearance serve as a site of memory, documentation, and imagination by acting as a multi-temporal device to look into the past and future of Hong Kong in both space and time. It uses the built heritage as the productive starting point of a drawing collective, offering both a site for research as well as space for new production, as it offers not only an image of the past, but also a prefiguration of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Wow, today is definitely show off of Hong Kong architectural education. After Nick from Hong Kong U, then we have Patrick from CUHK, and we see how creative our architectural teaching in Hong Kong can be. And next we have Lavina, also from Hong Kong U, to talk about the exhibit. Yeah, she will introduce the exhibit a bit, and then we'll have Shadow and also the students' representative to talk about the exhibit in detail. So Lavina, over to you.
Thank you. Could you help me share the slide, please? Okay, so after all those beautiful videos and drawings that we just saw, so now comes our turn. What I'm going to do is simply give you an introduction on who we are as a team and what this exhibit was meant to do, and then pass over to the students who actually did the heavy lifting on our side of the exhibit, and to Team Shadow, who did a lot of work on their side of the exhibit to talk more and tell us more about what their visions were. So as an introduction, our team, which is Group 10, is a 3-way partnership between us at ACP, which is the Division of Architectural Conservation Programs, and my name is Lavina. I'm an assistant lecturer at the program, and I'll allow the students to introduce themselves. 2 of them couldn't be here with us today. That's Theo and Anne, but when we come to your exhibit, the others can introduce themselves. And we have the team from shadow architects in Hong Kong. And we also have Roger Wu, who is an individual heritage practitioner and also the manager of Hopar School of Music. He couldn't join us today, but he has also been an incredible contributor to our exhibit. So you may notice the title of our exhibit is called Past, Present, and Future. And we have two distinct parts to it. There's the left side of this image and the right side. And this is quite intentional because we wanted to juxtapose two visions of how we understand distribution and land distribution in Hong Kong, and what are our understandings of the heritage of the place and how do we imagine the future. So now you may say, well, you have past, present, and future, but you only have two sides. So where is the present? The present is the viewer. So we imagine that the viewer brings in the dimension of the present and positions themselves between our narratives and between our interpretation of the past and the future. So with that very brief introduction, I will hand over to Elzefin and Edison to introduce themselves and then talk about the past side of it and then pass over to Team Shadow. Thank you.
Thanks, Lavina. So I will share my screen now. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elzefin, and I'm an undergraduate student in ACP. So representing ACP, our team is responsible for designing an exhibit that is related to the past. We tried to come up with some narratives that could represent the urban history of Hong Kong to the largest extent. We decided to embark on the idea of housing as our timeline. So we can see three exemplars of typical housing typologies. The first one is the Blue House, which is a pre-war townhouse cluster built during the 1920s, and the townhouse cluster on Wing Lee Street, which is a post-war townhouse cluster during the 1950s, and Mayho House, one of the earliest models of public resettlement estates. So how do we link these three the housing typologies together? We attempt to link this historical timeline with the evolution of the tramway. The tram is a kind of cultural landscape which witnessed the progressive development that is unique to Hong Kong, especially the changing coastline of Hong Kong Island throughout the past century. And how did we make use of the mirror reflection? With the repetition created by the reflection, we try to create a sense of street patterns and urban grid in Hong Kong, which is found in a number of old districts, such as Sham Shui Po. So now I will introduce different kinds of public housing and typologies in Hong Kong. So you can see this is the mirror we are trying to create to represent the urban grid of Hong Kong. So first, let us introduce the Blue House cluster. This is a collection of 3 shop houses dating from the 1920s to the 50s in Wan Chai. Throughout the decades, the upper levels housed residents, while the ground level housed some small businesses. The cluster is an exemplary illustration of the working class community in Wan Chai. Yet in the past 20 years, relentless urban renewal projects has spelled out gentrification in the Wan Chai district, where a streak of high-end residential buildings and chain stores have regional community. Despite surviving such rapid changes, the cluster was also once designated to be transformed into a tourist attraction in 2006. In response, some organizations have collaborated with professionals and local concern groups such as social workers to come up with a more sustainable conservation model, which was finally accepted by the government in 2007. So under the slogan, conservation first, community always, not only the building and its people were preserved, the stories and the social connection embedded in the Blue House cluster, which attributes to the uniqueness of this historical place, was also retained. So let me pass over the time to Edison to explain to us the other 2 buildings.
Good afternoon, this is Edison from ACP, and this is the Wing Lee Street in Sheung Wan region. So actually this is a group of townhouses from the late 1950s, the post-war periods. So what makes it special because of the common like the typology of shop and the living space in Hong Kong. So and the ground floor space is actually some factory for the printing shop, and it is a rare industry which still exists in these areas. So when it comes to the public concerns and also their memories, it starts from the 2010 when the movie called The Echoes of the Rainbow get the awards from the International Movie Festival. So that reminds the people how important these post-war townhouses is related to the local communities. So that's why later the urban renewal authorities which has a large project for redeveloping the neighboring environments and also some like the old tenement buildings. So they just stopped this project and change it into revitalization projects for the local children and also the teenagers. So we also exhibit the shape and also the space of the Mayhall House. So Mayhall House is the first one of the public buildings in Hong Kong, which provides the public rental housing in the late 1960s. So after the famous Chicken May fire, and the government actually took a really quick response to build a massive clusters of public rental housing, and it provides really economical rental flats for the local peoples and the refugees. And this is the Mayhall House is one of them, which is located in Shek Keng Mei, and it was closed in 2005, and it was renovated as youth hostels 10 years ago. So it provides a more a new life to the old buildings instead of the old rental purpose. So in this project, we emphasize the past, present, and future concepts. And actually the past, how we combine the past to the present and how we present it to the future. So the most important thing is when we tell the story of the past of this building, and we also conserve the existing, we call it the character defining elements, the story, the history, and also the people. The most important is people. So we can change the purpose, but also keeping the people and also keep this present to our future.
So this is an exhibition of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. So we're gonna move. Let me share screen. So like ACP team and Edison has said that our exhibit is actually dealing with the past, present, and future, and what we're trying to convey as a message is how we're gonna change the way that the city look when we start changing the way that we design as an architect. So we create this infinite kind of cityscape within the small box, and then we explore, like Edison, Lavina, and the team had said about the past, how we're gonna adaptively reuse and conserve the past. And we also project how we're gonna struggle when we have to be dealing with all the redevelopment needs of the city, that how we can strike a fine balance when we try to conserve or try to redevelop. So our team exhibit actually, well, we name it a biodegradable city. It's actually a manifesto, an imaginary project that we think, if we try to think about it, the way that we designed, we did develop a city in form of evolution instead of demolition. Well, the word the biodegradable is not just mean that we're using biodegradable material that the building will just deplace and disappear. It's actually a man-made process that when we try to build something, we're actually taking down part of the old and then recompose it into the new. So it's a man-made biodegradable process. It's also an attitude that we keep part of the old and we transform it, we're giving it new life, and we reorganize and redistribute the resources. So, well, before going into the design proposal that our team proposed, we give everybody a little background of how we get inspired or how we address the problem that we have right now. Actually, according to the Hong Kong 3030 by the Hong Kong Green Building Council, well, about 20% of the waste intake at the existing landfill are actually construction and demolition waste. And the inert nature of such waste actually cause a lot of environmental impact. Well, with that said, it's actually very problematic to us because as an architect, we always think about building something, but you never know that even today we design the most sustainable building in Hong Kong by taking down one old building. It's already unsustainable. It's already creating impact to the environment. The act that we actually demolishing an old building cause a lot carbon footprint to the world. So then we start thinking about then when we build, we take down existing building, we transform it at the same time. We build at the same time we unbuild building. So we are taking away the demolition process. We start deassembling building. We use the word evolution, and well, instead of transformation, to actually evolve the building and then change the way that the building is organized and help the building to adapt to the modern need of development and the modern need of the populace. So we actually pick a hypothetical site, which is a very interesting site in Yau Ma Tei. It's called Manhua Shenqun. It's actually by a famous architect called Eric Cumming. And it was built in 1960, around 60s, 70s. And it was very densely populated residential block. It's actually next to the element in Tsim Sha Tsui. And it's composed of 8 housing estate, which name started with man, so they call it man. They also call this 8-man estate because they have 8 different buildings starting with the word man. And you can see it's a very typical Hong Kong living condition where it's extremely dense. It's a central core. It's a linear project. We don't get a lot of exposure or window frontage, but we're really deep planned. And well, it's very fascinating when architect looks at this this kind of building. We thought, wow, we should keep it, we should conserve it. But the thing that the people living in the condition and the neighborhood within the district is not something that the residents inside are longing for. So, well, when we deal with a redevelopment, we should think about how, as an architect, how we can transform the situation and balancing that, how we want to conserve it as an architecture and how we want to improve it as a living space. So we then propose to imagine a city that is constantly evolving and adopting, and we actually taking down or transferring part of the old introduced to the new building that we're proposing. So we actually was really hypothetical, and we imagine that we're introducing new structure to actually replacing the existing structure, and then we start taking off the existing facade like piece by piece, almost like a cargo. And then once we do that, we're actually creating a lot of different urban voids within the cluster. So this urban voids can not only serve as the ventilation, daylight, all the we also actually dealing with density problem. So once we create a void, we're actually putting back to roof, which I will explain later how we're going to treat roof. And we also insert like a new form of circulation on the outside buildings. So the public can actually get to access to this newly created urban voids. And this voids actually will turn into different kind of public space. Sometimes it'll be larger, it will be like a public park. Sometimes smaller, it will be a more intimate kind of public space that people can have a seat on and can work. And we also create different atrium space to bring light into the cluster. So by doing that, we started reorganizing the old building. And then we also introduce a new form of structure, surface, all in one kind of a machine that we talk about is what we call the biolithic pillars. It's not just structure, it's also surfaces, it's also surface pointers, and it's also changing the way that we design the building. And then after we actually create all this void and we put it back onto the rooftop, and on the rooftop then we can create a new type of habitat that's across the entire neighborhood. And the new natural habitat is actually formed on the roof as a second layer of public space. So, well, when we try to reorganize and redistribute the old building, when we redevelop the, well, what we call the heritage of old building, we're at the same time recreating a new type of living habitat or new type of design on the second layer, which really turns the development into what we call the biodegradable city. And well, on top of it is imaginative. So we imagine that could be a really exciting habitat that can combine living with public space, with greeneries, with working space, and then it all happens on the second layer, and it keep on spreading across the entire neighborhood. So, well, if we start to think about redevelopment like the way that we're proposing, we're doing a project like we do as an architect, we can spread it to the entire CTA fabric, and then we can bit by bit we're shifting the look of the urban fabric. And then, well, even the way that we're proposing this new typology is also meant to be taken down one day and transformed into something else and keep growing to cater for different needs of different time. So so this is how we imagine with the physical aspect that we actually presented. We want to create actually this kind of infinite cityscape that we imagine. We try to change the way that we design. So now I will show you a short video of how we will just talk about. So to help you guys understand a little bit more. Sorry, share again. There you go. Okay, there you go. Well, okay, so well, to conclude, well, our team's work is actually it's a physical model after all, and we really encourage every one of us as go to visit the physical model, because that's something that we as a team with Lavina and Roger and the ACP team, we really hope that people can find their own perspective of how we look at this matter through this, well, how we designate like a single viewpoint, but we want people to actually explore with the physical model and have fun with it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shadow Architect, including Benjamin, and also Ken Chong. Yep, and participants, if you do have any questions for our exhibitors, please feel free to type your question in the chat box, and I will keep checking for them, and will help you to ask a question. Okay, so yeah, and also thanks Ken Chong for giving introduction for the physical exhibit that will happen in Hong Kong in City Gallery quite soon in October. Yeah, and so then you'll be able to see Shadows and ACP team's exhibit in front of you, and of course we can also see Nick video as well as Patrick's team video inside the City Gallery. Yeah, okay, so before asking questions on behalf of the public, let me ask you guys a roundtable question, because it happened that all of your exhibits do relate to history and the older parts of the city, older fabrics, etc. So as teachers, architects, and also students, so why is history important in the sustainable development of a city? Would you please share your view? How about Nick, to go first?
That's mean. I already started first. No, happy to share. Yeah, of course. Well, it's you know, as a teacher, you know, being responsible for creating a very experiential and inspiring learning environment for our first year students, it is essential. And this is what I'm telling them all the time, that only through history you understand the place. You really have to look back to be able to look forward. And this is such a cliched sentence, but it's true. Given our example with the back alleys, it's only possible if you look back on how the shop houses have developed, how the current, you know, with the building codes, how they have changed these courtyards into the back alleys, what they are today, and then giving our current observations how these building necessities, this technical necessity has turned again into courtyard-ish situations. It's just natural that you only get this wonderful big picture, the understanding of urban small spaces, by looking back to their history, where they're coming from, what they have, you know, how they developed. So yeah, absolutely essential. And I guess at the heart of everything is curiosity. This is what our courses are all about. How do we spark, especially for our students, how do we make them aware of this fantastic urban fabric that we're living in, and make them curious about and asking questions, asking the right questions, why things the way they are is crucial, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Nick. Then how about another teacher, Patrick, your turn.
Well said by Nick. I mean, I don't have much to add, but to I guess to say that I mean, architectural history begins, you can say, you know, with the first material being placed. So there's you know, history kind of begins at any moment in time, and you know, when communicating with students, sometimes I like to instead of the word history, we use continuity as a means to kind of link the various events. And history is not something that's back there, but it's just a process, right? That that if you think about it, this kind of continuity is what you know, constitute the environment that we live in. Another, I guess, concept that's kind of interesting is you know, if you think of the word originality, which is very often what designers are trying to aim for, but in fact, you know, the word originality is very much connected to the word origin. So in order to be original, you know, one can argue that you need to go back to the origin of things to understand the most fundamental you know, meaning of, you know, inhabitation, for example. What does it mean before any kind of invention can happen? So sometimes it seems obvious that it's important, but it's about how to I guess come up with new framings to either pose the design questions or communicate certain knowledge.
Thanks, Patrick. Oh, let's have another view from another teacher. Lavina, what do you think?
Oh, I was going to actually invite the students to answer this because we already had two teacher views. So why don't we ask them how they think about it? No.
Well, I want to be more organized and have teachers view first. Lavina, your turn.
Okay. I think when it comes to us as educators, as teachers, we're constantly in touch with the generation that's going to follow us. And I think it's important what is the message that we want to send them, and what is the choice of how we want to send that message. And I think for us and our part, it's very much about understanding the future as a sustainable future. And in that sustainable future, there is a vision of what we have today and what can be given tomorrow. So it's not just, pack up, dust off and go away. It's really how do we grow sustainably? So that would be my contribution. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does relate to the title of your exhibit, past, present, and future. So architects, Benjamin and Ken Chon, what do you think?
Well, I think as an architect, we always look back to history, and not just because we want to learn how people design in history. Well, I think it's very important for our design is that only to look into history, how people gonna use the building, how people gonna live inside the building. That's something that as an architect, you never can predict it. Well, we can only represent 10, 20 individuals, but what we create, what we design is actually influencing a lot more people. So by looking at history, we start to see how people gonna live, how people solve their problems in the old days, and how people deal with different situations. And that actually very inspiring, informative for us as an architect to design the future sustainable building. We cannot just come out scratch on paper. We have to look back at how people are actually using it and how it comes from the history of design. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we treasure a lot. Yes.
Oh, I'm quite happy to hear that the architects are not being so egoistic, just thinking about, whoa, you have to enjoy my design, but really they are respecting how we use our design, our spaces. So last but not the least, how about the students? How do you see history in creating a sustainable city life? Alston and Addison.
I think that the history of the city is very important because it tells us who we are, and that is our identity. That's what makes us different from others or from other cultures in cities. So when we do conservation, when we think about what to conserve, we usually start by understanding the place, to learn about the history of a certain community, in order to know what are the character defining elements, what are essential to be preserved. So with that in mind, we can create a sustainable continuity, like what we have proposed in our exhibits, through the tramways or through the mirrors that reflects that sustainable methodology for us to continuously develop our city and to add value to our existing historic fabric.
So Addison, anything to share?
When we talk about sustainability in Hong Kong, we more related is to the people, the change of mind of people, because in the past centuries, we keep moving and just want some speed and keep expanding our cities, but we also keep pulling down our heritage, just like you can see how the central market once threatened to the edge of a reconstruction since the 1980s, when Hong Kong was a really great international finance center. So after 20 years since the handover, and more people have been reminded that we have to sustain and also keep our history instead of keep demolishing and just building some new structures. Otherwise, in like 200 years ago, if we keep this speed and process, it will kind of like losing our identity, or just keeping like the glass facade, the curtain walls, but we have nothing old or our heritage to preserve to our like next generations.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Edison. I would like to end today's webinar with a softer question. For our title of the Hong Kong Collateral event actually is in response to the question, how will we live together, raised by the architect from MIT, teaching at MIT. So I would like to know, this time for the Hong Kong event, we do make teams together by putting different people unwillingly in the group to create an exhibit at the end. So how have the experience been so far since, I think that was since the end of year 2000. Yeah, so how was, the end of 2019 actually. Yeah, so yeah, wow, amazing. So how has this journey been for you and your team? Anyone with anything to share, please feel free to raise. How about starting from the other way around, from the biggest group first? Lavina, Edison, Elizabeth, Ken Chong, and Benjamin.
I think this time it was very unique. Like us, like with Lavina and Roger, like I have to say is we agree to disagree. The kind of idea, like we come from the idea all over the place, and then afterwards we kind of narrow down. And I think it's great that we do see things completely different. Of course, like Lavina very much from the heritage angle, and us like grounding from the past and then building on the future. I think it's very much related to the past question that you just mentioned. Like we're actually doing the central market, and then one of the greatest things that we actually know about after it opened is actually the idea of like the urban, like almost memories, like people come back and enjoy the space. And that gives us, I think, a very deep link, like how when an architect actually design a future project, that a project can actually root in the past in the first place, and also it can actually keep going. The idea that building a place, just like our the future vision, that it can actually be keep going on like as a continuity. And the fact that if someone going to see our exhibition or model, that you can almost like choose like how do you imagine the past on your left and the future on your right, and even mix together. That is something we think has been very successful.
Yeah, I think the grouping was really well, I don't know if it's by accident or what, but I think it's really good grouping, because Roger has a lot of Roger was is not here, but he provided a lot of advices to us, because Hope How Mansion is one of the more iconic conservation project in Hong Kong, which led by Roger. So he gives us a lot of valuable advices on how conservation is done. And Lavina on the other side give us a more academic perspective on how we look at designing Hong Kong right now. So I think what we, as an architect, we provide more design, more architect point of view. So I think it's about putting together different perspectives into one thing. And that's, I think that's matched very much with what the Venice Biennale is all about.
Yeah,
so
I will.
Putting every different perspective into one place.
Great,
So,
great. I really like what Benjamin just said, agree to disagree, right? Well, this is how we live together. So Lavina and students, anything to add from your group?
No, I think I agree with Ben. And I mean, it was really nice, because as they mentioned already, we had diverse backgrounds, we had different interpretations to the same topic. But then eventually we found our commonality and that common ground, and we could work simultaneously side by side and kind of, come up with one exhibit that can stand itself. So I think we're really proud of this collaboration and worked out really well. Yeah.
Great, great. How about Patrick? as a teacher working with students, how do you find the experience for this Biennale this time?
Well, I think the kind of question set by Sarkis was very ambitious, but within the project, it's one of the kind of objectives to kind of enhance collaborative drawing. In my case, letting students co-create, and it works really well. Yeah.
Great. I believe that they do have an excellent learning experience working with other class members on such a big piece of great work. Yep. So Nick, so this is your turn now.
The final words. We're already over time.
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to give me the mic? It will take forever.
Go ahead.
No, I like the question. Like, and after such a challenging year or years, actually, it becomes more the question: how do we live together again, rather than living together? Because we're so used to this separation. What we usually tell our students is that we also need to learn. Not only appreciate the work, and I absolutely agree with the other speakers that it's fantastic to have this clash and these contradictions, because they are fruitful, and you need this tension to actually do something creative. But it's also essential to not only appreciate but also learn other languages, in the sense that architects need to learn to speak engineering, and engineers need to learn how to speak architects languages, and conservation languages, giving the fact that we're all in the same built environment discipline, yet we're so separated sometimes that it is indeed a fantastic opportunity to get back together and realizing that we're actually working on the same table, rather from different perspectives nevertheless. But yeah, I absolutely agree with everybody that it was fruitful. It was sometimes challenging, but that's what it is in 2021.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks very much, Nick, for your ending statement. Yep. So if you have noticed what's happening on the chat box, I have shared the links to Nick and also Patrick's work over the chat box, and just that Shadow's design, Shadow's video has also been shared. Okay, so without further ado, I will end the webinar here, and I will hope to see you guys physically in the City Gallery exhibition. Yeah, stay tuned to any updates. Okay, thanks for joining. See you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.